And then there's
Okay.
that.
I'm going to call the January 19th. This is the January 19th, 2022 meeting of the Fire Station Building Committee. Since we're streaming by Zoom, I'll take a roll call in the order that they're on my screen. Blythe Robinson.
Here.
Justin Yanosik.
Here.
John Kent.
Here.
Aaron Hunt.
Here.
Chris Baker. He gave a thumbs up. You're muted, Chris. All right. Chris is having technical difficulties, but he's here. And Chief Kinney.
Present.
All right. First agenda item, as always, we'll open up to public comment, though I don't see anyone from the public on the call. Is that right? Okay. So without further ado, we'll move into the discussion items. So Ron, I don't know if you have this list, otherwise I can kind of go bullet by bullet if you want to kind of give us an update one at a time. First one is
No, go ahead and go through the list. Yeah.
sure. First one is results of test pits and borings.
So just an update on that. They did the test pits yesterday, or excuse me, Monday. They told me that they'd have a preliminary findings by the end of the week, if not the report. But I think the full report will be coming out next week, given what they've done. So the good news is I've asked them to call me if they see anything bad on the site, and we didn't get a phone call. What I mean by that is sometimes the driller goes out and it's a very difficult drilling operation. When they dig the test pits, they have a difficult time digging for whatever reason with fractured rock or something along those lines. So the good news is we didn't get a call. So I'm kind of hoping that when they do give us a call about the findings, it'll be good news.
Okay, so you haven't heard anything at all.
Nope.
Okay. Next item is recap of planning board informational meeting on January 11th. I know I was there. Aaron was there. Thank you, Aaron. You had a lot of very good input, I thought. But Ron, I don't know if you want to summarize anything from that. I took a couple notes from it.
So we do have to get what I would consider three special permits. So in talking about that with everybody, they basically took a look at what we were doing and said, on the north side of the property, and I guess the easiest way to do this is if I just bring up the drawing, right? Of course, where is that?
Oh, you almost had it.
Yeah, is it not?
Nope, not yet.
You see it?
First
I can-
flash, then it was gone.
Your screen flashed up for a second.
Okay.
Put
Try
one
it
up on.
There it is. It's back.
Better?
There you go.
Yep.
All
there
right.
you go.
All right, so sorry about that. So this is the west property line. This is against the church. We're going to need to get a special permit. It does not come from the planning board. It actually comes from the zoning board of appeals. And that we're asking to get the setback from 50 to 30. So that's the discretion that the zoning board has. The next thing we're going to ask along this same property line is the 30-foot green belt. The planning board has the ability to waive that. So 2 special permits, but really it's all rolled into one for this western property line. One is you can see if we get rid of that 50-foot setback and that becomes 30 feet, then we can get our driveway in there.
Mhm.
And then it's just a matter of how much money do we need to spend on landscaping to separate our driveway from their parking lot. I think the residential screen, even if you read it in the bylaws, it references the fact that residential properties want to be screened from business use, right? So, or downtown use. So anyway, that's one. The other one is this parking They consider this being in the front yard because the beginning of the parking happens before the face of the building. And the planning board, they seem like, oh yeah, you just need to apply for a special permit and, we understand the site use and so forth. And the last special permit that we need is the number of parking spaces. So in discussions with the chief, we're targeting 30 spaces. So if you interpret their bylaw, using it the way we interpreted it, you would need 20 parking spaces, in which case we'd be asking them to add 10 more. But you could also interpret it meaning a sort of an occupancy level where the meeting room, training room becomes an assembly space, the bunk rooms become residential use. And so if we went down that road, we'd need about 50 cars, in which case we'd be asking them to back that down to 50. So I think the way we're going to write the special permit is exactly that way. We're going to say one interpretation lands us around 20, one interpretation lands us around 50. We actually only need 30. The special permit is to allow 30 parking spaces. And like I said, chief, if they end up saying we want you to have 31 or 29, can
25 is fine with me too. So,
Okay.
as long as we get above that 20 threshold, I think we'll be good.
And just, again, for what it's worth, the more, so every parking space, right? If you figure it out, and if we get the cost, we could figure it out how many parking spaces, what the cost is per space. It's usually a pretty good chunk of change. And every parking space we don't need becomes less impervious surface, which means our drainage system goes down. So if we can do 25, maybe we target 25. If we can do 30, then we do 30. So, whatever you think is best, that's the number that we'll target with the planning board.
I think as long as we can be confident that if there was a meeting going on with 2 people in each car driving to the meeting and the people who are working, whatever the shift is at the time, I mean, would that be a real basic, a different way to calculate it? I mean, I realize that's not how it gets calculated, but.
Yeah, so typically if we were doing a public meeting room, a community meeting room, typically it's like 1 parking space for every 2 people.
Right.
And so with that, well, I should also say that during the planning board meeting, there was discussions about us reaching out to the church to discuss with them overflow parking in their parking lot. But if we did it that way, you'd end up, I think that's where you get to the 50 cars, Blythe.
The parking lot, the meeting room is for 40 people, right?
Right, but because if you do it that way, the meeting room could have an event taking place, while at the same time you still have firemen in the firehouse, in the residential
But
spaces.
20 cars gets you a full meeting room. And then how many
Yeah.
cars of people on shift?
Well, if I could just clarify too, the meeting room, if you take the tables out and have chairs
Yeah.
only, you can double the amount of seats in there.
Oh, right, I'm sorry, I just had 40 stuck in my head.
Right, that's okay.
Got it, sorry.
But it's a good question because, Chief, if you had 40 people in your training room, how many people would you also have on shift? I think you're on
We're
mute.
going to have a minimum. We have a minimum of the 4 right now, but if that meeting was if we had a recall during that time, it could be up to 12. Like, if we go based off of our numbers averages, we get the turnout on a full recall is about 8 people plus the 4 that are on shift. That's 12. So
And if you
that's
add that to 20, that would be the 32.
Well, it feels a little
That's why
safer to be closer to 30.
Okay.
Just my.
I think 30
2 cents.
was 30 was the magic number, but if it's saving us a pretty chunk of change for 5 spots, like in the event that we play the law of averages, we have a full recall while there's an event going on, we'll just as we do so well, adapt and overcome. I would love to have more parking, but if there's something that needs to be cut to save a little bit of money on the for the day-to-day operation, if we've got 25 spaces, that's plenty.
Well, we don't have to make a decision tonight, but maybe you and Blythe can can discuss the idea of what's, 25 to 30 spaces. I don't, 5 spaces is 5 spaces, right? So
Yeah,
what are
yeah.
the spaces are roughly 10 by 20, I think, in your guideline, in the bylaws. Sometimes they can be as small as 9 by 18, but I think in the bylaws, there was a specific dimension. So, it's pretty simple to figure it out. The cost savings is not going to be that much, but everything, every dollar, right?
Yeah.
So that was the update with the planning board. The only other thing we discussed was what we need for a green belt along the eastern property line, which is the neighbor, and then the southern property line, which is the hill and all the trees. So they suggested we take some photos, so we did that. And the next time we meet with them, we can show them how dense the trees are back here. And, the density of the trees comes about halfway almost to the back of the existing fire station now. In addition to that, there's also a neighbor's fence that is along the property line. So really what we would be talking about is just, some green belt areas. And then the question is, how close do we need to get to the road, which we can also talk about sight lines with the planning board. So, our goal is to minimize the amount of green belt and then create a landscaping piece in here, which, Chief, we were taking a look at this and, identifying it as grass, but we've also thought about doing a biodiversity planting out here. And then our landscape architect, who, by the way, comes from a family of firemen, she suggested we could also make it into a little bit of a park that included spaces for you to have annual picnics or things like that, like gatherings. So drought resistant plantings, well done. So it's kind of a hangout park for
For our
events.
stormwater permit, we're gonna need 5 different town-owned locations where we have a rain garden or something.
Mhm.
So definitely this is one where we, we're gonna be doing this anyway. It might be a perfect one to try to fit in some way.
Yep. And then there's another area over here, which we can do something along those same lines, Blythe. Or maybe, even bring everything down in this direction from the apron. If we sloped it in that direction, we could capture a lot of stormwater there. We've had success in the past putting stormwater under parking lots, the drainage. So essentially taking a look at that whole area up front might be another good way to, number one, stay out of the ledge, right? And keep it close to the drainage system. So that's about it. Anybody have any questions or concerns with what took place at planning board?
I had 2 things in my notes. One was the chair of the planning board seemed pretty keen on allowing travel around the back of the building. I know we've got that large ledge outcropping there.
Mhm.
I guess maybe to have some sort of response next time if we're not doing it, we think it's going to cost roughly X to do that.
Right. So from a code perspective, it's not required because we don't need the additional perimeter access. And, it's just a convenience thing. And I know that on much larger projects, when you do the math and you do the code, and most fire departments, when they take a look at it, they want to get around the whole building to have access around the whole building. So you will be able to park a fire truck here and run the hoses here. And you will be able to park a fire truck here and run the hoses again here without going around a corner. So that's really what that 30-foot access is all about. We are taking a look at the design of the building. We talked to the working group today about possibly pushing this wall in.
Well, actually makes
Oh, you're breaking up a little bit, Chief.
While Chief is unbreaking, if
Oh,
stuff
I was
goes
going
on
to say,
go ahead.
No, we lost him again.
If stuff goes on the roof, where would access need to be for, to get up to get stuff? Very
Right here in
technical
front of these
size.
doors. Yep, right here in front of these doors.
I mean, what's gonna go on the roof? It almost sounded like the entire roof is gonna need to be pitched based on the feedback we got at the planning.
So we believe that this side will be pitched, and
Yeah.
then this and this piece, and technically all of this can be flat. I mean, again, with the pictures that we took, you really can't see anything in the back here
Okay,
from the street,
yeah,
you know, because of the wooded lot behind it. But you can see all the way back to this corner, you know, which was part of the discussion we had with the planning board. And
Okay.
we just assumed you could see this because that's kind of like right
yeah.
there.
And that's whether it's winter or summer.
Yeah. Yep. If you're coming down Main Street in this direction, you're going to see this just because of the expanse of the parking lot. So it's not even the
But what if you
road in
drive,
front of the church.
yeah, what if you're driving along in front of the church? Okay.
Again, you can see all of this,
Left.
but
Yeah,
you can't
okay.
see this because
Right.
the trees kind of wrap around like that.
If the intent is to use hoses or training in that field by your cursor there's going to need to be some sort of water reclamation or irrigation or water management that takes place in that area, even if there is ledge.
Okay. You're
mean,
talking
like-
about like drains in the parking lot?
If you move your cursor down towards the bottom of the screen, keep going
Yeah.
right in that area where you said you could run the hoses without having to run them around corners. They are going to put out if they are using hoses in that area, it does put out a substantial volume of water that would need to be dealt with.
Right, but that'd be like a one-time event when the station burns down, right?
I mean, the chief could speak on it based on how his operations are, but typically training with the lines takes place or training with the pumps, and to have an area where they could do that close by, I think would be beneficial if it's within the scope of the project.
Would that be something that would take place in the parking lot, or are you suggesting?
Regardless of where it takes place, there
Yeah.
would need to be some sort of water
Yeah,
management that goes along
I
with it.
mean, yeah, we would, you know, we could potentially use that, but you know, if you know, we have the aprons and the driveway spaces, which are great for that. And if they have drainage included, they should hopefully be able to all from us, you know, and it's in that back corner. If you move your cursor down and to the left, you know, that training stair does have drainage in it, and we would be, at least the plan is for it to have standpipe connections to practice. So that corner parking area we probably use pretty frequently, being that it's got the proximity, and the training stair would be set up to accommodate drainage and that kind of stuff.
Okay, we'll have a meeting with our civil engineer and just talk to him a little bit about this. And I think what we'll do is send you a diagram, chief. And if you can just explain, like just in a narrative, what'll take place here. Like in part of that narrative would be you have a, I don't know, 4-inch hose, however big the hose is, that's going to run for several minutes or whatever you think the training would be. Our civil engineer can calculate that and figure out what he's going to need for that reclamation that Justin's talking about.
Also, if they are going to use water or lines in that area, it would help to have a water source. I mean, I don't know that a physical fire hydrant would be necessary, but maybe like a wall hydrant that runs off the domestic supply in that area might be helpful. So that way they're not running 300-400 feet of line to get from a hydrant on the street to where they're doing the training. Again, the chief would probably know better than I would.
Well, that's another good point because your hydrant is right here,
Okay,
you know, so if we did put a wall connection right there.
Yeah, if I could add to that too, Justin, a lot of times when we do those training stairs, especially when they're wet, is we'll do a Siamese connection at the stair just
Right.
for that purpose.
but it would need to supply the water to the engine company rather than have the engine company supply the water to the Siamese.
Yes, correct.
Okay,
Yeah, I guess what Jason is saying is that the Siamese is not connected to the sprinkler system. The Siamese
Correct,
would
not for training purposes. That's
connected to
right.
the water line.
right.
Yeah. And then to that end, one thing you may want to consider is, and I don't know if your water district will allow this, but it's part of our notes to work out with Matt during our department meeting. So most sprinkler systems are separated from domestic water outside the building. And question that we would have is, does it make sense to have 3 separations? So one goes to your sprinkler system, one goes to your domestic water system, which pretty much ends up in the sewer, right? Or the septic, I should say. Should there be another dog leg off of that line that is specifically for training? Because I think, Blythe, correct me if I'm wrong, you get charged for water use based on what's going into especially if there's a sewer project coming up in the future. You'll end up getting charged for what gets dumped into that sewer. So if you're not actually.
Generally, water system, sewer charges are based on how much water flows through your meter, and the sewer is charged on most, maybe sometimes all of it. So.
Right. So what I'm thinking is, do you want this off the meter? Because it's recharging the ground.
But if it's treated water that the town's providing, and we charge each of our buildings users for water. So why would we treat this one differently? Is another question to kind of be pondering.
And generally, when we train, for example, we let our water superintendent know, and we let him know what hydrant we're using and check to see if it is in fact okay. And if it works, for that time of year in the area that's going to be, and he'll give us the thumbs up or the thumbs down, and he's able to track that, and he knows, what we're doing or what we're looking at.
Because we have,
Yeah, I do like.
We have to report to DEP, and our unaccounted for water, and if it's just flown out of a hydrant, not metered, and not accounted for, that counts against us.
Is a thought maybe, Ron, to put another hydrant on the other side of the building, and then when it's being used, you put a meter on it so that you're tracking the water for training, but you're coming off of Main Street with the line.
Yeah, we might want to just leave it on the building to save some money, but the meter that you're talking about, like you would do during a flow test, you put the device on there, to measure how much water is coming out. You could certainly get one of those. And again, working with the water department, you'd be able to track, hey, this year we used X number of gallons for training.
What's your thoughts on that, Chief?
This site would afford us the opportunity to actually do some of our training on site. Currently we go off site to do literally everything, just about, especially if it involves pumping or water use. The fact that we would be able to do that on site, is good for everybody. It's good for the whole department, good for the whole town, from the standpoint of we're able to stay centralized and, work on that stuff and not have to go to a remote part of town or a different part of town that, may increase our response time to different places, so, again, the site is flexible with on an apron and even the green space we have, the way it is set up now. I do think the points that Justin brought up, having that corner about a training stair and even a grease pump into the site mechanism to train.
Chief, you're still really breaking up. I don't know if maybe if you turn off your video, sometimes that helps.
We lost you, Chief.
I think we lost him.
Where will the domestic water enter the building and where is the sprinkler room in relation to
My
how we're
kids are
looking at
upstairs.
it?
Right here.
I mean, I know everything adds extra cost, but I think it would be worthwhile to put a physical hydrant somewhere in that location where we're not adding
Like right
an
here.
extra 300-400 feet of line or pipe, but the value, it's definitely going to get used and there will be value to it. Even if nothing else than to refill the tanker rapidly, the times that they do training, it's definitely worth the investment, in my opinion.
But if it has to be metered, then it would have to be fed from the building then, and we wouldn't do a separate street opening from Main Street.
But it-
Correct?
Right, but we could accommodate, we could figure something out there. I mean, I
Yeah,
think,
I'm not
it's just
I'm
a
not
water
insisting-
calculation.
yeah,
I'm not insisting it be metered. I'm just saying we should be thoughtful about whatever we decide because DP really is cracked down on communities on unaccounted for water. And I don't know if it happens once a year. I don't think the town really needs to be that worried about it, but if it was used on somewhat a regular basis, that, could become a problem. So let's just maybe in the working group, really think it through and come back with a plan.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to derail the whole meeting here.
no, it makes, it's good. We got it written
How
down.
we
It's on
get to
our radar.
perfect.
Yeah, this
Those
is the
things we
time,
need to know.
right?
Don't worry, I have another point later on. We'll see how that one goes.
Wow.
Fair warning.
Ominous.
So is that good for the site planning board discussion?
So not to belabor this, but
Yeah.
one last thing is so you said the 30-foot green belt on the west side
Mhm.
is only needed as a residential buffer. And so we're going to try and get relief from that.
So, yeah, so the way the bylaw is written, your property is the business core, outside the core, so B1 outside the core. And then this church happens to be residential, which
Right.
is R2. So the way the bylaw is written, it says, hey, when you're a business and you're abutting a residential property, and you're building a driveway or the building within 100 feet of the setback, you need to have a 30-foot green belt within the 50-foot setback. Now, if you read that, most residential properties don't have a parking lot, right?
Yeah,
For R2. So
I get all that. I guess
Yeah.
my question is that is the church involved in that decision at all, or is that purely a zoning board?
I think the green belt is a planning board. The setback is
Planning
zoning.
board.
So the green belt being planning board, I mean, during that meeting, they actually came back and said, well, why hasn't the church built its own green belt, right? And again, when you read the residential zone, it doesn't say that if on the residential side, if you're abutting a business, you have to put in a green belt. But
Right.
I didn't want to bring that up because I thought it was helping our cause by saying, hey, the church doesn't have a green belt. Why should the fire department have a green belt? If in fact you're looking at, basically paved surface on one side and paved surface on the other side. It's something that we could always, if they didn't want to give us a special permit, maybe we'd ask for permission to only put the green belt because it's the town, right? The town's paying for all of this. So maybe if the church ever sells its property in the future and ends up building some single family homes, then the town puts in the plantings, right? But until that time, they don't. So,
Or maybe the plantings, I know there is a residence on that property, maybe, whatever
Yeah.
site line is from there is where
but the resident on that property is like, if this is our building, the church is over here
right,
and the residence is here.
right.
It is like, I don't think that green belt's doing,
Sure.
anything for the resident who is sitting at the edge of the parking lot of the church.
Okay.
But that it is, I think that's,
There's actually a lot of greenery and in.
Oh, we're losing you again, chief. All right.
I stopped talking. You,
Yeah, the connection is really bad.
oh my God.
It's almost maybe better to call in rather than trying to
Yeah.
use the internet connection.
Could be.
No. And Kevin, there is a person who's got a hand raised. I don't know if you want to take any public input. I just want to call it to your attention.
Sure. I guess if it's related to what we're looking at here, is that I think it's Donna Jones.
Hi, this is Donna Jones. Decades ago, I was an active member of the Federated Church. The property caretakers are called the trustees. I was on the trustees when the town and state redesigned the center of town, meaning they put in the roundabouts. The DPW director, Butch Vito, approached the church, the religious leaders of the deacons, and he approached the trustees to say, we need to move the driveway off of Main Street. And the police chief strongly recommended, we used to have grass along Main Street, and that was the play area. The police chief strongly recommended that we move our parking lot towards Main Street. So if any car came off Main Street, it would hit other cars instead of possibly people. So the town changed the driveway. The town made us move the parking lot. There was a steep hill on the west side of this map, on both sides of this extreme left line. The DPW put in that swale. The church didn't, as far as I know, didn't get asked permission to put it in. The town put it in. As far as I know, the church was not asked to maintain it. Exploration of a new public safety building continued, and they said, we can't do it on our existing property. Church, would you sell us the steep hill? The church met with police chief, fire chief. Church said yes. It went to town meeting. The property was sold to the town. The town took down the hill. Being part of that committee, I think there was no discussion of what zone are we? The town approached us and said, would you make this change? We sold the property. They took down the hill. The church is all volunteers. I don't think anybody thought of, oh, we need a buffer. The town needs the property. We sold the property. The town took down the hill. So for the planning board to be saying, well, the church might not be in compliance, the town made the changes. So
Well, I think
Up
we,
to-
yeah, I think we all understand that. And frankly, I don't think anybody on the working group or the fire station building committee is supporting or even commenting on the planning board's discussion about the church's compliance. Aside from that, I think that what we're trying to figure out is, do we need to plant some plantings there or not? Right. So,
right.
Ron, if I could jump in, pull up Google Maps and the conversation is clear, right? Or I can share my screen if it's easier.
Can you all hear me better now?
Yes.
Much better.
All right, perfect. I'm dialed in now.
Yay.
Okay, so there we have it.
I think you might be sharing the file and not your screen, because we're still looking at the planning board layout.
Okay, hold on. Let me stop share.
Yep.
Better?
Yep.
All right, perfect. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I mean, so my point is, you know, we're talking about buffers and property lines and what's there and what isn't there. You know, from the residential property that is the house, there is a green buffer to the future police station. I mean, to the future fire station, right? I mean, you could argue that to the existing station, you could barely make it out around the corner of the trees, and the new fire station is going to be even set further back into the trees, right? And then there's the church property and the parking lot. So, you know, we can, you know, the intent of the green buffer as it's written into the zoning is to provide separation from the commercial district and the residential districts in town. Right. So I think this is a unique situation where we happen to have a residential property which isn't being used for a residential purpose. And I think the intent is that it will stay as a religious use for its future life. And if it isn't, it'll be an interesting conversation about whether this property should be residential or not. I think we have our fire station, which isn't a commercial building. It's not a commercial development. It's a civic development, right? And it's a unique situation. And the site plan approvals and the special permits exist for special situations.
I think the message, Donna, is I mean, unless something goes sideways, I don't think any of us see anything, you know, happening with the church.
Yeah, it's just a matter of getting some relief from that green belt on that side.
And we're trying to get that
and
release.
I'd add to this conversation that the situation is only going to be improved because the amount of landscaping between the church parking lot and the future fire station is going to be more than there is there today.
Right.
Correct.
And I'd say it's a good neighbor thing to talk to the church. The church has had the opportunity to need the fire truck there. It may be a pathway between the two properties that a truck can come right in. You know, you're going to need overflow parking, so the church could help you there. Hopefully the planning board can be convinced to make it easier for the fire station committee. Thank you.
Thanks, Donna. Okay.
Okay.
Those were all my items from the planning board. I don't, anything else to add, anybody? Okay. Next one was any follow-up from the select board January 18th meeting. So the only two I wrote down was really, I think, related to maybe a future community event. There was a member of the public that spoke during public comment at the very beginning that I guess was demanding to know why the cost had gone up and what the cost to the taxpayer was going to be for the fire station. So I think we had kind of talked about that before, but Blythe, I don't know if this falls in your court or not, but trying to get a handle on, you know, okay, we've got a project cost of X. What does that mean to everybody's real estate taxes? You know, I think that's going to be something that we want to get a handle on.
Yeah, I think it's that and a little bit more. I mean, when we know the number, and we have a number right now, but we're, 25,115,000 or whatever exactly it is today is going to be hopefully a little lower at the end. So whether we put out, what that's going to actually be in terms of once you take out the 3.3 million and so on, what that final number is and what that equates to each person, it may change by December or a town meeting vote. But it certainly can be, communities have put like a calculator on their website and you can go and put in your property value and it'll spit out the number for you. That's definitely possible when the right time comes. But even before that, I think the other thing that he asked was explain to the community the difference between what we were told this project would cost 6 or 7 years ago and what we think it will cost now and what's changed and why is it? And I think that's something to have ready for a community meeting at some point as well.
I definitely think we shouldn't put that number out until we have the real number, because whatever the first number we give out is going to become the number that the public sticks at.
Yes, agree. I think as we start to refine our estimates though, during these next couple phases, I think we might at least want to have a ballpark number so that someone, if we don't calculate that until January, right before everybody goes to vote, then, that information might not really be out there. I'm not saying we need to put it out there right now. In terms of, so that second comment, Blythe, I think was not from the public, that was from the select board themselves. I think it was Kevin Calcutt that mentioned that, kind of explaining how to get from, maybe they both kind of hit on that, but they said it in
Yeah, I
different
think
ways.
so.
I mean, the part I struggle with is that I honestly don't know how they came up with their number before. And so how to say we got from that number to this number, I'm not sure how we would really explain that.
I mean, we can go back and dig out, the design that showed 16,000. There was a design that was like 17,000 square feet. And we can watch the town meeting where they asked for the money and see what they said to everybody. And then go to today and explain the differences in code changes and NFPA and the reasoning for the size of the building that we're proposing, which, oh, by the way, is fairly well in line with the 3 feasibility studies that have been done, and explain to people, we're disappointed it costs more too, but here's why.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I've watched some of the meetings from that timeline, and it was never clear to me how, because there was a study done that said 22,000 square feet, and then there was a couple meetings where they presented the cost and it was at 16,000 square feet, but I couldn't find any sort of explanation of.
So in
I
the,
think the explanation of that was what was palatable at the time. I think what we're doing as a process is very different, and I think the only way we can one of the only ways we can put it on the table, I'm not saying is the only way, but is to, without throwing previous administration or leadership under the bus, is, hey, they made an attempt at doing what they thought was in the best interest of town. We learned from that mistake. We didn't just pull a number and say, we're gonna make this work, because that was unrealistic. And even then, there was no way what they proposed was ever gonna happen. From day one, it was not enough. Even then, you weren't gonna build a station for $4 million or $5 million. There's no way. It was not within the realm of reason that was gonna happen. So, I mean, I know that it's hard to fathom, but it's hard to get people to understand that. But it was a promise that was never going to be kept. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's tough, but I mean, it's the truth. The truth is that there was a number pulled out of the air that says, okay, this is what we think will be palatable. I mean, I can tell you the number of times I've heard from people in the community or even town employees that, well, I think, you should make it, you can do it for 15 million. Well, how? if you have a magic, crystal ball or wand that can make what we need fit in a $15 million budget, please tell me how, because we certainly are working at it and trying. And the typical response is, well, you just cut it and you just be happy with this or that. And I'm like, so you want us to irresponsibly blow $15 million of taxpayer dollars, but not even come close to meeting the need of what the service is demanding, which, it almost has no logic behind it. But I guess that's kind of where we are and where we launched from in the previous was, well, this is what's palatable, so that's what we're going to say. And we'll just figure it out on the fly, which we know now doesn't work and got us from the town perspective and, in this pickle we're in now.
Well, we could do a little more digging internally and try to figure out exactly what people think was the starting point, what they were told before, which size building was it? And I'm sure there's got to be some files that, I know Matt has some, and try to reconstruct that so we can do the comparison.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we can have some reasoning of where that square footage came from, it becomes easier to explain why this square footage is different or why the square footage is needed. Otherwise, I think
Work
it's
on
going to
that.
be, it's going to be tough to explain without sounding like we're just throwing somebody under the bus from the previous review.
But I mean, I think we've done a lot of that, though. I mean, a lot's changed in the time between that estimate and today. I mean, codes have changed, firefighter practices have changed. The station has grown. I mean, there's a myriad of things we could point to that we've talked about as part of this design process as to why the building being discussed today is larger than the building that was discussed then. Right, the cost of it is a different. That's a touchier subject, right? But I think we can point to the track record of that project, with the police station and the cost of the police station after what was estimated and what the end cost was. And if you wanted to say that the police station was originally estimated at X and it ended up costing Y and the difference was Z, we can say the fire station was estimated at A using the same ratio as the police station, that's B, and that would equal C, right? And maybe be interesting to see what the C number is, but it's going to be bigger than whatever was originally estimated, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think we can, you can build responses to this based on conversations we've had in the past with this committee and the working groups.
I'm just thinking of the strategy we might want to, because, the number, so the 2001 study that Matt and the chief found, it actually says how they got from the written program to a smaller building. They just took the bays off and says they'll just build the bays in the, not all the bays, but they reduced the number of bays and said they're going to build those in the future. Which gets to the select board members' concern about, we doing a project and then having to come back in 10 years and throw more money at it, right? That was one of the select board members' concerns if we started to peel back the size of the building from what we're at. And I also think, as someone just pointed out, Aaron, the cost of the building, we can look at these cost trends from when they started and the price of construction that's gone up. I mean, that's just the price of construction is the price of construction. And, we've all been doing this for 20 plus years and the price of construction hasn't gone down. I mean, obviously you have the dips when in 2008, 2009, when the market crashed. But aside, and by the way, by the time we got to 2011, those costs were right back up there. And they haven't gone down since. And so, we are hoping, frankly, that, as COVID backs off and these supply chain things ease up, maybe the cost will come down a little bit, but then it's going to be fighting your annual inflation anyway. So, it is a big discussion, and, I don't think anybody's going to be able to point at a chart or point at a sentence and say, here's why a project is so different. I think, Blythe, you're 100% correct. The project is actually pretty consistent, right? Because from 2001 to 2017 to now, every team that's taken a look at this has come up with basically the same size building. And then it just has to do with cost. So, if somebody says, hey, you can build a 23,000 square foot building for $4 million or $6 million, then obviously they had a way of presenting that obviously didn't turn out quite well. And I'm trying to say there's no magic bullet to this explanation. And it's like the chief said, it's not about throwing people under the bus. It's just about saying, it's a different team. We're coming up with the same analysis. And in this particular instance, we have an OPM and an architect and estimators and, everything working on specific plans, right? It's not a concept of what we think might cost something. It's the actual plan. So, I think the process, Blythe, you talked about earlier today with the working group that's another big difference is we're putting together a project with actual estimates of an actual project. We're not coming in with a feasibility study and saying, this is how much we think it's going to cost.
Designs weren't done at the time is what I understood from my research. So they were hopeful it would work out that way, but they didn't know for sure, which is why we've discussed going to town meeting with bids in hand. So to the extent people are frustrated about the cost change, hopefully they're comforted or feel more confident that we know we're telling them what the actual cost is.
And I think the idea is that we just got to have that this list that we just went through, and anything else that we may come up with. That's the list of the reasons why there's a difference from then to now, and keep repeating that.
Yeah, I think if we can have some of this, I forget when our next community meeting was. I think it was end of February or early March. But I think we're going to want to at least have some of these talking points for then.
Mm-hmm.
Even showing some of those old studies and the square footage we have, and then maybe just a chart showing the escalation of construction costs, to explain it.
Yep.
And then, whatever information we can dig up on how the previous estimates were made, or square footage was made, if that exists. So.
Okay. But the select board meeting last night went very well.
Yeah, I think other than those two pieces, I think, we explained the process we went through to approve the proposals of Dorn Whittier and Vertex, and I mean there were some questions about it, but nothing really shocking. So I thought it went pretty well.
Yes, the signed contract should be in Don Walters and John Lemieux's inboxes.
Good.
I actually saw it show up tonight.
What's that, Don?
I said I saw the contract show up tonight. I didn't open it, but I saw that the email came. Thank you.
Be good reading tonight, I'm sure. Next is review owner project requirements. I think that's the 15
Yes.
page document that was attached to the meeting packet.
I think the easiest thing to do is if anybody had any questions, we can go through them. But just so everybody knows, we do have a meeting next Wednesday at 1 o'clock with Mass Saves. And a lot of this OPR information right now has to do with the systems of the building. How does it operate? What are the times? What are the schedules? What's the energy use? And that's what this is focused on right now. We will be coming back next week with room criteria requirements, right? And that's where we'll start taking a look at how is every room used in terms of finishes, equipment, furniture, within those spaces. So did anybody have any comments from what they read? We did receive some comments from Steve and we made some adjustments.
I have one comment, but it's kind of deep in there under the lighting.
Mhm.
I don't know if you want to go through it in order that appears in the document, or if we just want to take a stab at whatever comes up.
Yeah, whatever comes up. What do you got for the lighting?
I was looking through there and it was talking about specifically in the apparatus bay where the lights are going to be situated and that they're heavy use lights and all these other things. But I find one of the issues that we have in our stations, especially most of them were built like in the 1930s, is the lights don't come on when the doors open like they do in a residential garage. So it makes it at night more challenging and more risky to back the vehicles in. There definitely should be some kind of way to trigger the bay lights to turn on and shut off when the bay doors are opened, especially for a vehicle returning at night. They shouldn't have to send someone out of the vehicle into the building in order to turn the lights on.
Okay. Get that in there. That's more than reasonable, and I'm sure we can do it with lighting controls.
I mean, I know it's kind of nitpicky, but I think it's important, or at least mitigate some risk there of a vehicle hitting something.
Yeah. Yep. Good catch.
Maybe we can make him a commissioning agent. Inside joke.
Well, funny you should say that, Blake. I was waiting in case there's any more questions, but we did, as part of our discussion today on the OPR, we did talk about commissioning agent. And we are carrying money in our budget for an HVAC and building envelope commissioning agent. And if for those of you who may not know, the commissioning agent is basically a third party that gets hired to sort of really scrutinize, in particular, let's just take HVAC. They really scrutinize the HVAC system as a third set of eyes, you know, the design, and then they review the shop drawings and submittals from the contractor, and then they perform periodic inspections during construction. And one of the big things that they do is they sort of monitor and observe and comment on the startup and the functionality of the system when you know, when boilers are started or air handling units are started. And the system as a whole controls, and they as someone said earlier today, they, you know, the contractors don't really like the commissioning agents because they pretty much put them through the paces, which they should, you know, along with the design engineers and us who are looking at it. But they're really focusing on one particular item. And you know, similarly, a building envelope commissioning agent is going to be looking at roof, windows, doors, cladding systems, vapor barriers, and so forth throughout the project. Was also sort of brought up that, and personally, I haven't done this on any other job, but you know, possibly commissioning the fire suppression system and the electrical systems also. You know, all good ideas, all good thoughts, but there is a, you know, a financial impact to hiring them, which you know, we said that we would begin to put out proposals, requests for proposals for commissioning services. But one thing that Ron brought up is, generally speaking, the HVAC commissioning agent sort of comes in towards the end of CD and then really goes through construction. But they're suggesting that they may come in at the DD stage to be more involved in the design, so that when they can offer some comments to the design before we go to the DD cost estimate. Because if they're looking at the system at the end of CD, then, you know, if there's some changes that need to be made, you know, we're sort of at the, you know, we're getting ready to go to bidding. So, and again, that would be, you know, that would be an extra task for them. But we wanted to sort of bring it up and see if anybody on the committee had any comments. You know, we're not looking for any kind of vote or anything tonight. We want to get some cost, and we're not gonna get lump sum costs. We're gonna have some of the tasks broken down so that, if we're gonna have someone do the electrical commissioning, well, we'll have a price for that. If we're gonna do HVAC commissioning in DD, we'll have a price for that, and then we'll have a price for the construction portion, so that we can really look at it, both from the assistance to the project, but also how it impacts the budget. I don't know if anybody had any comments, input, suggestions along those lines.
I'll jump in, Stephen. One, I think it's important to get the commissioning agents up front for lead purposes. I think for lead credits, you need to have them on by DD. I think it's in all of our interest, and I think profess interest on this project to be lead certified, if not well certified, if not other agency certified. So I would say it's coming up on being something we should pursue in order to get the credit for it.
I think we're designing towards lead, but we're not
Yeah,
going for a lead.
I didn't think we were actually pursuing the certification of
Right.
lead.
Right, we're doing the commissioning as a best practice, not as a requirement or a need for any particular third-party review. And having said that, I will say that I believe Mass Saves requires commissioning to take place, because they're going to base your incentives, when the building's operating.
When did we decide that we weren't going to pursue lead?
I thought it was in the RFP, actually. I could be misremembering that, but
I have to look it up.
Aaron, do you think there's a part of the town that would really look forward to this being a lead building, or would they?
Yes, most definitely.
Yeah, would they?
We're for the investment that we're making in this building. We're talking about from an energy production standpoint. I mean, we're going to be there anyway.
Right. So the reason I'm asking that is, we've had projects where we talk about lead, we talk about chips, and then as soon as we start talking about net zero, which is what we're trying to target, right, the net zero ready project, that's, to your point, that's what people are really interested in. Hey, we're going to have a carbon free building because it's all electric, and it's going to be a net zero ready building. Great, we're going to make our own plaque that says net zero ready, so there is that component to it, because I know that we're doing this on the energy side and the sustainability side. We do this as a firm anyway, but what we don't do is, check off all those lead boxes, because some of those lead boxes actually cost money for a project like a fire station. A lot of those lead points wouldn't apply. And so the big question is, do you want to spend the money to get that third-party verification, or do you want to just sort of present the facts that, we are targeting a net zero ready building? I don't know if that makes sense, but people look at it as, instead of doing lead, instead of doing chips, instead of doing an NBI project, or a passive house project, we're focusing on our sustainability vision, which is, to have a carbon free and a net zero ready building.
And you'll get additional costs from the contractor to pursue all that paperwork. Also, they'll basically assign someone to it. So there'll be a additional cost on the hard cost side, just from the contractor's aspect.
And we don't want to talk you out of it. I mean, we'd be happy to do a lead project. We do lead projects for many of our projects. But it's just.
I'm looking in the RFP for designer services. I'm actually not seeing any mention of lead.
I got a thought too. Like, I'm not a big fan of lead myself. As a state project manager, we're forced to do it, but I'm not necessarily a fan of it because it's chasing points, throwing dollars at it to achieve certain levels. I like the idea of pursuing the standard of it, or even we're going to exceed it, right? But I do really like the idea of bringing the commissioning agents in early, especially like with the building envelope. The commissioning agent's going to test that envelope during construction. And if you can get their like methodology and process into the design up front, I think it just simplifies things a lot. Plus we've got that extra expertise. That being said, I don't know what lead cost is. It's usually pretty cheap, but it is what, $4,000 or $5,000 for a fee, and then plus the consultants and things like that. So that's just my thoughts.
Well, maybe, I mean, maybe we weigh the cost of that when we're weighing the cost of the commissioning agents too, when we determine what we want to do. Just for my own education, why is electrical and fire suppression not typically commissioned?
Well, I could just talk about the fire suppression. I don't know. I've never done the fire suppression, but I've done alarm systems. So in other words, the BAS has an alarm system to it. The fire alarm systems get commissioned. And the reason they get commissioned is you'll always have a time where the fire alarm's not working. So the manufacturer will say it's an installation issue. The installer will say it's a manufacturing issue. And without the commissioning agent being a third party to the owner, you're going to have to sit there with your striped shirt and a whistle and decide not only, who needs to come up with the fix, but sometimes troubleshooting it, you just can't get an answer, right? So, because the manufacturer will keep saying, I don't know what's wrong with it. It has to do with installation. And then vice versa. We don't know what's wrong with it, but it has to do with manufacturing. When the commissioning agent comes in, they have the ability to actually go through the tests themselves and they can diagnose it, right? So that diagnostic piece is just very important. So same thing with the lighting controls, right? So the lighting controls is the same thing. We just talked about maybe having an interlock with the doors. So when the doors open, the bay lights come on. That's something where if that aspect of the system wasn't working when we go to open the building, it's the commissioning agent who will actually diagnose the problem and say, this is what's going on. Either the wiring's not working or the manufacturer's not working. And so they've been a pretty good ally for that. So that's the electrical piece of it. The plumbing piece is just related to the hot water heaters. Again, it's efficiency based, right? So you want to make sure they're connected and the pumps are running and things are running the way they should be on the domestic hot water side. So it's very limited in the electrical piece, basically to alarms and alarm systems. Your card access system is another item that commissioning agents have been taking on because, again, is it the manufactured system? Is it the wiring? Is it the way the hardware is installed, which is the door hardware? You can imagine that there's a lot of different players. And when you get to the end of the project and it's supposed to be working and it's not, and the finger pointing starts, that's really where the commissioning agent can help out, diagnose what's going on, direct people to, tell us what they found, and then we direct people to make the correction. And then on the HVAC side, it's, almost just about everything, right? It's the connections and the efficiencies and the dampers and how the system's operating, the sequence of operations and all of that. So very limited on the electrical and the plumbing. Fire protection, I don't know. I mean, unless you have a dry system, maybe. But it's the systems that are complicated enough that, our HVAC engineer wouldn't know the control sequence and the control computer programming logic or algorithms that make this stuff work. A commissioning agent will, and they'll have access to people who do know how that works. And they can sort of come in and recommend, this is how you can fix this. So just bringing them in on the earlier side so they can review the design development package so we can get a good design development estimate. That's where their sort of value comes in, if you will, because they'll be able to say, according to the drawings, there's 100 points of control that needs to take place. But when you look at the specifications, none of this stuff is calling for control points. And, to Blythe's point, why is this something that's not getting picked up by the design team? And, she's right. We all have to work together, and that other extra set of eyes, it helps. And when you're doing a construction management process, like many of you may have done in the past, when the CM comes in, many times those CMs have what they call electrical mechanical coordinators during the design phase. That's the stuff that they're looking at. They're trying to make sure that, if you're calling for a system that can pump out a certain number of CFM, that downstream that matches what you're trying to serve, because in the DD portion, remember, these drawings aren't done. And so because they're not done, you want that extra set of eyes with a different level of expertise who's not looking at anything that has to do with design. They're simply looking at, operation at a very early stage. So,
Yeah, and as we move into construction, I think one of their biggest strengths is the controls, like Ron said, sequence of operations and testing and balancing. If there's issues with CFMs or water flow, and you've got a testing and balancing report, they'll not only will the engineer review it and note things, but the commissioning agent will also note things and be out there potentially with the balancer to go through things if there's certain areas that are not up to the design standards and they're having a problem either with exhaust or supply, and move on to the units that either maybe on the roof or on the ground, and then look through the controls. Controls are like Ron said, it's programming, it's complicated. They're the experts on it. They see all of the various manufacturers because they're on multiple jobs. So I found that their value, once we get into construction, is at the end with the functional testing and then the actual I call getting the bugs out of the building. I mean, it always seems like the controls is the issues as you turn over a building, and sometimes you'll see them right away depending on what season you're in, and then when you switch seasons, you may have something else come up, and they're usually available to take you through it, and you're under the warranty period with the contractor. So it's definitely important to have the commissioning agent on the project, and bringing them in a little bit earlier, I think will only help.
like Steve said, we have $100,000, so we can tailor the services that we believe bring the most value for the 100,000 or less. That's what we had in the budget.
Is there another option for like commissioning when it's like a system that's not normally third-party commission? Like, I bring that up because at my work on energy efficiency projects, we'll have our consultant develop like a commissioning checklist, and then we have the contractor do those tests and then like sign off, and we verify that they did those tests, but we don't necessarily hire a third-party commissioning agent. I don't know if that's something that might work for those like electrical and fire systems, or if
That's
that's
very
something that has
similar
to
to the pre-functional checklist that the HVAC commissioning agent comes up with. They develop those, they send those out early, and they expect that the contractor will fill those out, and you have varying degrees of success. Some of the HVAC subs are very good about it. Others, it's like pulling teeth. But when you start telling them, well, we're not going to pay you until you do the work that you are supposed to do, you finally get them. But that's on the HVAC side. I think John, you're talking about some other systems also. Sure, something could be developed in some of that may be in manufacturers
startup procedure or whatever.
Yeah, they're future O&Ms and stuff, their recommended installation, which should be part of the submittal packages.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if you can bring those costs to us, Steve, it sounds like at least the people here that have a background in using commissioning agents certainly agree that bringing them on earlier is better. So
yeah, and we'll have them break things out, so we sort of have like a menu of things that we can choose from.
and this is being hired through Vertex, or be hired through Doran Whittier? I was confused when Ron said it sounded like it was going to be hired through Vertex, but then Ron said he had a line item in their.
Well, no, we have a line item
Project
in
budget.
the total project budget.
Project budget. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. I put that together as I was saying it. So
I've done it a couple different ways. Sometimes it goes, generally it goes through us, but some municipalities want the contract direct to the town. I mean, you know, we're gonna be coordinating with them. We're gonna be, in communication with them. They'll be, once you get a contractor on board, we're gonna have some kind of project management software, Procore or something. They'll have the ability to log in and gain submittals and have full access. We include them on meeting minutes for job meetings so that they're in tune with what's coming up. So, but how the contract is let out, it can be a couple different ways. We can talk about that.
Okay. Anything else on that item from anybody?
No, I was just gonna say, like, from listening to our, subject matter experts, and then correlating some of the things that in my, talking with area chiefs who've been through building projects, it does sound like, the building envelope piece, the electrical or programming piece is critically important, because those are things that I've heard multiple times that have been, issues. Either there's been moisture or moisture barrier problem when it comes to the building envelope, or a membrane or something isn't, performing or wasn't, built to specification or what was expected, or, there's been a HVAC programming or system control issues is a huge one that I just hear all the time, that like nobody knows how to, turn lights on after 6 o'clock, and nobody can get this door open, or nobody can get, so I do feel like, from hearing that and then correlating, what's being said by our subject matter experts here, it does seem to make a lot of sense to have those commissioning agents, especially on a project with such a large scope and such a large investment and magnitude, to be able to have those extra eyes to make sure that those things are being done correctly. And if there are any issues, we have somebody that can definitively diagnose it, instead of exactly what I've heard from what, has been shared tonight, but also from other chiefs, is I call this person, they point the finger to that person. I call that person, they point the finger back to this person. It's all back and forth with no solution. So I think that really is something that could be very beneficial for us.
Okay, we'll get you that information.
Thanks, Chief. Next one was review floor plans, massing, roof lines, and exterior materials.
Yeah, so we're still working on that. We did have a working group meeting today to talk about the floor plans, and we're trying to find, like we talked a little bit earlier about the site plan. We reorganized some space behind the building, and then we're doing some internal reviews of, can we get rid of some doors? Can we get rid of some walls? Can we combine some spaces? So that's still in a work in progress, and we'll have more to share next week. But I think at the working group meeting today, the chief was, very helpful in terms of, what can we do basically to make the building more affordable and more operationally friendly. So
We want to punt that to the next meeting.
I think so. Yeah. And then, the exterior materials is something that, when we show you the design of the front of the building and how it's evolving, we will actually show you the materials and be able to share them. And if next week's meeting or the next time we meet in 2 weeks, if it's even in person, we might want to actually bring some samples down. I know what bricks look like, what concrete blocks look like, but you may want to see some siding options, that we're considering.
Sure. No, I think that's a good idea. All right, next is future attendance at a design review board meeting.
Yeah, so what we'd like to do, and Aaron, I guess this is directed towards your role as the design review committee. We'd like to get your review and approval, basically, right? Or at least semi-approval on what we're doing to the outside of the building before we go to the design review committee, obviously. And we also, it was recommended that we do that before going back to the planning board for the final submission. So we do have some time. Right now, what we're looking at is a final submission to planning board in June. And so our question is, would April be an appropriate time to start the design review committee process? Design review board?
That's a
I
hard
guess what I'm
question to
asking is
answer.
if we, like, in your opinion, if we started in April, you think we'd be done by June?
Yeah, I mean, in my experience on the design review board, we don't go more than 2 meetings or so before we make our recommendations. I mean, it really depends on how proactive the groups are in getting back to the questions that were actually asked. My guess is that you guys will be very proactive. So it's not usually a long drawn out process if that's kind of what you're digging for. The other thing is, we meet as needed. So it is potential, we don't have to wait every month necessarily, like a month doesn't have to pass before we can meet again. So if you wanted to sort of plan for it, what I'll call an expedited review, maybe you just schedule 3 meetings in 3 consecutive weeks and maybe we don't need the 3rd one.
Okay, so then I think what we'll do is exactly that. We'll plan on starting the process in April. And, we'll plan a couple of meetings and maybe 2 weeks apart, just so when you have comments and thoughts, we have like some time to amend some things and revise some things and talk to the working group about it and so forth. And then you as the building committee before we go back. So, okay.
I would recommend getting in touch with, I guess it's going to be Betsy, because getting the first meeting scheduled will probably take longer than any of us want. So you might want to start that process sooner rather than later.
Sure. So we'll reach out. Okay. And Betsy's, is there contact information listed on the website? Because I know the names of the committee members are.
Betsy Pajol is the administrative person in Rich's office that schedules.
Okay.
I know she schedules the planning board and Board of Health. Maybe she also handles, I guess she handles DRB as well. So
Okay, perfect.
she'll know who to reach out to wrangle people to a meeting.
Yep.
Set up a Zoom and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, no, do you guys reach out to Betsy or Rich for the planning board stuff? You go right to Rich?
We've been going to Rich.
Yeah.
Betsy has sent stuff out back to us, so I recognize her name.
Mhm.
Okay. Next is department meetings. DPW facilities, building, fire, police, design and review for building systems and materials and department preferences. I don't know what you want to talk about related to that, but
Just that we're going to schedule that meeting. Next week we have mass saves and hopefully then the following week, we're going to have that departmental meeting.
Yep, February 2nd
February 2nd. Yep.
at 1.
At 1 o'clock. And we'll set up a Zoom meeting if anybody wants to attend remotely, but we're going to try to have that in person at the EOC at the police station.
I sent a meeting request today for the room.
Yep. Saw that.
Public information sessions. So I think we talked at a high level about dates last time, but I don't think we zeroed in on anything in February, correct? Is that what you wanted to discuss or?
Yeah, we were thinking, when's a good time to have the February meeting? Again, if it were a Wednesday night, the 9th, the 16th, or the 23rd, that would probably be best, right? Because we can arrange that with our committee meeting.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think we know that Wednesday night works for everyone here, so that's probably
Right.
best.
There is, just to make sure, there is February break in there for the schools. One of those weeks in February.
Yeah, it's the week of the 21st.
Okay, yeah. I know I'm potentially supposed to be out of town during that span. If I don't, I think I might not be married anymore. My wife we need to get out of town for a little bit. The other dates are good for me on Wednesdays. I think I had a conflict on the 2nd. It's my son's birthday, but other
Yep.
than that.
So do we want to tentatively set this up then for is it the 16th school vacation?
No,
No,
that's
21st,
23rd.
21st to 25th.
right.
Okay, so
it'd be the week before. So.
maybe we'll try to set something up for the 16th.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think when we spoke last time, we wanted to make sure, it'd be nice to have some renderings and floor plans at that point to show. So as long as you think you're going to be ready for that. I think that was the one question.
I think we should target that.
Yeah.
I mean, given our schedule, we're going to have.
Sure.
And the front on elevation anyway, the front of the building rendering.
Yep.
And the floor plans. So.
And that still gives us our next meeting to kind of talk about that community meeting a little bit more, because I think we just want to kind of game plan some of these cost questions for that meeting as well. So
Okay.
we'll talk about it a little bit more in depth on the 2nd. So yeah, I'm not aware of any other events on the 16th, so maybe we just have it at the fire station again. I don't know if there's somewhere warmer in the fire station.
Well, hopefully, we're not in the midst of one of these, 20-degree days with 40-mile-an-hour winds and freezing, because, we definitely would need to back up and punt if that was the case, because, we probably wouldn't have a good showing and nobody would be able to hear either.
I think it
Have
is
you-
important to have it at the fire station if possible, because it gives people a visual of what we're up against here.
Yeah, I agree. Just if it's 20 degrees, it might get a little cold in there, but we'll cross our fingers.
You know what? We can adjust or adapt and overcome. We'll pull the apparatus out so everybody can be inside, and we'll run the pump so that the cold isn't an issue. We can have the trucks run for however long it takes us to do a presentation, do a little question and answer, and then put them back in. Excuse me.
Serve coffee.
Right. Okay.
There's a
All right.
coffee shop across the street.
Yeah.
Okay. So next meeting, we'll definitely want to be reviewing these exterior designs, and that'll
Yeah,
give
I
us some
think-
time
Yeah, I think
between
we'll
next
wanna-
meeting and the.
Right, review the floor plans and the exteriors, I think.
Mhm.
And if there's any updates well, you won't update the cost estimate until the end of SD, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. That looks like it's the end of your list, Ron. I don't know if I missed anything.
Nope, I think that's it.
So the next item is discussion on the acquisition of a larger temporary trailer. I can read Blythe's little write-up on this. At the last meeting, the committee noted that this item should be on the agenda. For this meeting, in order to determine a path forward for a new and larger trailer, we need to discuss the size of the unit, zoning impact, placement, cost, and timing, among other things, in order to formulate a plan to achieve this. So,
So to add to that, I had an internal discussion with Bob Bullock and Rich McCarthy with town council about the fact that right now the trailer, which has been temporary, doesn't meet the zoning setbacks. And in order to put a bigger trailer on site and not have it impact construction, it likely needed to go in the same place. And so we'd still be in the same difficult position of a trailer that doesn't meet zoning. I suggested strongly to Bob that, if this is truly, hopefully temporary, then, he could allow it because it's quote temporary, and, we'll all hope it's there for a year or two and not 20 or 12 or whatever. He did throw out the idea of putting it over on the west side by the church, and I said, I'm not sure that's going to work any better, given trying to operate a station while you're building a station, and, you know, at the same time. So I think he knows we just may have to do what we have to do. But I just want everyone to be aware of that. And then I think we just need to decide, okay, what are we actually going to go decide we're going to have, and how are we going to go ahead and procure it? So just some background.
So Steve or Ron, any update on the investigating trailer options?
No, I don't have anything beyond what we've spoken about before, but we have talked about the potential of having Ron and his team, you know, do a floor plan that works for what we need, because there's nothing that's off the shelf with you know, with trailer companies, you know, and that's, I mean, that's not in their scope at this point. But I think it'd be worthwhile, you know, to have that so that we have something to send out, say, this is what we're looking for, because, you know, we need I mean, generally the double wide trailers are sort of the same size as we've shown before. But I think it'd be worthwhile to have a layout, and then also know how we're going to provide utilities to it and where from. And whether that becomes something that a modular contractor would do, or whether that has to be a separate. There's been two schools of thought on that. Then in some cases they would be able to do that all in one package, because we'd have to put out a separate procurement for that, as far as I can see. It's nothing that we can just say, excuse me, you know, I want to rent this type of trailer for, you know, X amount of months. And, you know, and that sort of rolls into the second part of it, is how long is that going to be? And, you know, I guess initially we have to figure that it's only going to be, or that it's, we have to think that the project's going to get approved, so we know we have a set duration on how long we need it for, so that we can establish whether it is a lease, and that they come and they dismantle it and take it away, or whether it becomes something that the town says, well, we're paying so much for it, we might as well, it's cheaper to purchase it, and then we can use it somewhere else. But do you have somewhere else to use it? Because it's, you know, it's not necessarily worthwhile to buy something if you're going to put it somewhere and it's just going to deteriorate. So there's always been a bunch of different scenarios that we have to look at. And you know, the other thing is, when do we want to bring it in?
Isn't
You
there
know,
a third option of, which I hate to even bring up, but put it out there with in the procurement to rent it, but with an option to buy it if say worst case the town meeting doesn't go our way and we find out we're going to need it longer, we can then pull the trigger to buy it rather than assuming we need it for a long time?
I'm sure you could. I mean, many of those companies are willing to sell it, because sometimes, you know, they get it back and then they can't use it because of how it's configured. So I don't think that would be too much of a push.
Blythe, I don't know if we've put the question out there to different town departments yet, but like, I mean, should we put it out there and just to see if DPW will use it? I mean, they could gut it and use it as a storage shed or something, right? I mean, there's got to be
I can
somebody
certainly
out
ask. I
there.
have a meeting with them tomorrow. You know, if I knew the general size of it, and we have a number of, you know, old trailers out back we keep stuff in right now.
Yeah.
You know, would this be a upgrade or an add? I don't, you know, we've got a fairly large yard, but I just, you know, I don't know how if it would work, but we certainly can ask.
Well, you'd
Yeah,
have to, I mean, if it was storage, you'd have a lot of, I mean, this is going to be set up with dorm rooms and, showers and toilet rooms. So you might have to,
Well,
You got it.
sadly, it might be better bathrooms than the one we have at DPW, so.
okay, I don't know, I haven't been there, so.
Sorry.
Doesn't sound like
It's a
you,
nineteen
doesn't
seventy-eight
sound like you should
building.
go anyway.
We can,
So
we
just
can always
according-
burn it when we're done with it too. We can burn it and train with it, we can do extensive live fire training and, bring the whole town out to watch what we do.
I
So
think that
according-
Yeah, I guess Blythe, without even knowing the size of it, I guess you could gauge DPW's interest tomorrow if they.
I'll just say, hey, something, twice the size of what they have now, is that at all possible for you guys?
Yeah.
I think they're generally about 25 by 65, but I'll confirm that for you, Blythe, because I do have a couple of floor plans I just got to look up.
I mean, in a perfect world, if there's a place to put it and it wasn't ridiculous to move it over there, a tough thing for public works departments, especially ones that are, as at the age of the ones we have, is they never built them to assume that anyone could spend any time in them. And so, our guys, like a lot of towns, when you're working 24 hours for a snowstorm, you're lucky if you can sleep in your truck for a couple of hours. So the thought of a building like this that has some dorm space and you could take a shower and get some Z's while you're working a long storm would be probably awesome, but I don't know, how it could work there, but I will certainly ask.
I would say roughly 24 by 70, plus or minus, depending on the company.
Okay.
I just have a couple things that I feel like it seems like there's a few things that need to be decided, is like how big, what's the layout, and then are we going to rent or are we going to buy it? But ultimately the cost and all that is going to be factored on the size and the layout. So I feel like we kind of need to lock that down. And then I think Blythe brought up the point already. I had a question about if we sign a contract to rent it for 20 months and this doesn't get approved, are they just going to come in 20 months and take it back, or how do we manage that? But ultimately, I think it's important to figure out what the layout is, or at least what the components are and how they're going to be structured, because otherwise we're just going to keep kicking it to the next meeting and the next meeting and the next meeting, and we're never going to end up getting it.
Well, I guess, and we sort of touched on it, I think, before, but Ron and Don, is that something that you could, give us a proposal on, just to, because part of it, obviously we have a need for the firefighter occupancy that we know of, but there's also the potential for it needing to be ADA, MAB accessible. And I don't want to, you might get a company that's going to supply this that's not in Massachusetts, and I'd like to be able to give them a layout of what we want, as opposed to them coming back with something and we're going back and forth. So it would be, I think it would be something very simple within the dimensions of the trailer that we've got a couple of different sketches on, but with a little input
Do we have
from the chief.
I was going to say, that the layout of the Boston temporary quarters was pretty, I think that would definitely suffice. So something along those lines, maybe with a tweak here or there, but not extensive tweaking, I think, would be almost ideal. I think it had bathrooms, and, even had an office for the officers, and the bunk space. I think it had 6 rooms. We could use 6. I mean, I think 5 would be ideal, honestly, but, if it has 6, that's fine. I think, especially if it's something that could potentially become a break room, or if we're successful, the DPW could then use as, a better break space or a better office type space for some of their personnel. I know when I do the inspection in there, that building is definitely in, rough shape, and some of the conditions they're having to work through, it could be, really good or advantageous for them to have as a break room or a breakout space, potentially. But I don't think we need anything extremely elaborate. I think something along the lines of what was the layout or floor plan of that Boston temporary quarters would be great and be a significant upgrade from what we currently are in.
Okay,
That's what I was going
Chief, I
to
just happened to
suggest.
be looking at that one, because that's what I had on my shelf back here, and yeah, that had, but if you recall, the bunk rooms were open. They didn't have an additional, they had an open wall, which would be, I guess, simple enough to have them close that wall and put a door on. But
Maybe
it was 6 bunk rooms, 2 officer rooms, 2 bathrooms, a kitchen and a day room.
Yeah, I think something along those lines, if you add the walls where there's 5 or 5 private rooms, instead of an open bunk room, it would be, I think that would all fit in that floor space, and it probably could be a little smaller than that, but I think something along those lines is perfect. Day room, kitchen, the officer's room. I think that's would be a significant upgrade and something that we could use and could potentially service if the unthinkable happens and we aren't successful. At least we could get it to the second go around when we will be successful, maybe.
So that's what I was going to suggest. I actually worked in that building, and there were 6 folks that were stationed there at any one time. And rather than reinvent the wheel and start from scratch, it seems like a pretty good jumping off point where maybe it only requires minimal changes here or there. It was just in the state not that long ago, so I'm going to assume that the codes haven't changed that drastically and that they don't change that drastically from county to county. So that, I feel like, should give us a pretty good path, where as opposed to making this long and drawn out, we can maybe hit like 80% done when we start and then just tweak it to our needs from there.
So what I was.
Why don't I do this? Oh, go ahead, Don.
Oh, sorry. So what I was going to suggest is, why don't we start with that plan? Let's set up a separate meeting between Steve, us, and you and Chief, and just see what changes we may want to make to it. And we can do some quick modifications. And is your intent to take that and kind of shop it around a little, Steve? To get some pricing? Because whenever we, the modular procurements, it's a true procurement where you have to do the schematic design package, right? It's just schematic design,
I've done it before, and it's a process.
Oh yeah, then the bid specs and everything else. So it is a process. It's not, we know we can't pick off the shelf, but there is some work that's involved. So we can look at that too and see what that might take.
Is that building available?
What's that?
Is that building available somewhere, or do they own that and hold that?
It was.
It was, but
yeah,
I was given some other floor plans for this project that differed from this, so that I had been in touch with it. Aries is the one that supplied it, and Don gave me the contact for them, and I got in touch with them, and it may still be available, which is great, but then I think unfortunately, procurement wise, you still have to put something out. You can't just
has to be publicly
order it from them.
Yep.
I'm just trying to think of what gets us closer to the end result that we're looking for.
Oh yeah. No, what you're saying, Justin, is right on. I think if we could utilize that, or
hey, Justin,
some other.
Yeah, Justin, would it be possible for you to possibly talk to your higher ups and see if the specifications that were used to design that are available, so we could basically just use those as a boilerplate and make it even easier, right? I mean, if there's already specifications out there and that information is there, like, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I'm with you. I think if we can make it as simple as possible, and where it doesn't delay or create more hurdles for us in terms of the design and schematic design of the final project, we can piggyback off of something that's already been put together or done and do that.
Yeah, Chief, you can't see me, but we did those specs. I was doing thumbs up, so we can jumpstart this.
And you got them. That's perfect.
There you go.
We can
You don't
find
even have
it.
to ask. We already have them.
Okay, all
Yeah,
right, then we can continue this, you know, and I'll get back in touch with Aries. I'm sure if we put this out and Aries already has it built, they would have a pretty good price.
yeah, I think maybe for the next meeting, we just need to talk about, you know, the process to get that out, you know,
Yep.
and then I'm wondering if we're using that as a template, we have the size. Could we at least start dropping it on the site and see where it goes best? You know, so we can at least be moving that piece in parallel with the bid to try and move this thing along.
And talking to the building department, make sure that, you know, we can be aligned on the fact that it could go where it needs to go.
Yeah, because you know, I understand the point of let's try and put it where it is because it's just going to be temporary, but I think we have to put on our pessimistic hats for a minute and say this might not be temporary. And so let's just make sure there's not an issue with where it's going.
Well, maybe there could be some
Well-
sort of compromise where we put it in this location if it's temporary, and if it fails, we end up just having to move it to this other location where it can reside longer in the future.
Well,
Yeah, I
what,
think,
if we bring this in, what are we gonna do with the existing one? Would we take that out and put the new one in its place? Which is,
Also,
but you're saying it can't go in that location, right, Blythe?
So I
Well-
talked to Matt and he believes, so Blythe, I don't know if it's the same person you're speaking to.
I've been
But
talking
Matt-
to Bob Bullock, this building official, zoning enforcement officer.
Yep, same guy. So what'd you find out?
Well, the current trailer is a violation, but it was supposed to be temporary, and he certainly can give a temporary to a new one. And I said to him, well, Bob, you know, I don't like to ask you to do things that aren't on, you know, per zoning, but this is a problem. We can't put it in the middle of the construction zone where the new building is going to go. So if this is meant to replace the old one, then, you know, I'm kind of asking you to get past any heartburn to say we take out one and we drop in the new one, and that's the right place for it. We sure all hope it's temporary. We wouldn't want it to be permanent, but just because
Yeah.
you'd like to put it over on the other side, well, that's just a different problem, you know, with other challenges. So,
So it needs
It
to be
also
connected to
puts
the
us
septic.
even farther, it puts us farther away from the
Yeah.
apparatus bay and makes the operation even more
response
discombobulated
time
or
is longer.
disheveled.
Yep.
Yeah,
So I mean, from a practical perspective, it needs to be connected to the septic, right? And you don't want to
Yeah.
move the septic tanks. and the septic
no,
piping. So
good point.
so when I was speaking with Matt about it, he said exactly what you just said, Blythe, that if it's temporary, he doesn't have a problem with it. If
You
it's
mean
permanent,
Bob,
it's
right,
something the
Ron?
town's going to have to revisit.
You mean
Right,
Bob,
and-
not Matt?
Right.
You
The
can't know
building
that.
inspector,
Yeah.
the building inspector said, if it's temporary, he doesn't have a problem with it.
Let's
If,
just
I
make
mean,
sure
just for the,
it's
it's temporary
not
until it
adopted.
isn't, right? I mean, it's a temporary building until the potential that the town votes down future fire station development, and then we have to talk about turning it into a permanent structure. So
Mhm.
we'll cross that bridge when we get there, right?
you know,
So
He
ideally-
also did- he also did say it didn't need to have a pad, a board foundation. It could be anchored. I'm not sure what that means,
you-
but it seemed
they
like a
use
good
tie
thing for
downs.
us.
Yeah, they-
Yep.
Yeah,
anchor straps, it's
Right.
strapped or tied down.
Yep.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I think the current trailer's tied down.
Yeah.
That category 4?
No, it is not.
like
Not
it
even
is
close.
we have-
yeah.
Listen, if we have one burst of straight line wind, we don't even need an actual tornado. One burst of straight line wind come off of that hill, it will be obliterated into a million pieces across Main Street and everywhere else.
It means
We
the
now
current
have a
one, not the
category
new one.
0.
Yeah.
Yes,
How do you
I got-
really
and
feel, Chief?
unfortunately, I've seen it happen a whole lot coming from Tennessee.
Hmm.
And for some
Yeah.
reason, God doesn't like trailer parks.
Tornado magnet.
Yep.
All right, so-
Ideally, we would place it where the one is now because you don't really have use for that and all the utilities are right there. So there'd be a little
Is it chapter 149 procurement or what flavor does it go under?
It, no, it's
9B.
modular.
Modular.
procurement.
Yeah,
Okay,
I forget what number.
yeah,
I don't do
I don't
those
know.
regularly, so I don't know.
I think it might be 39B.
it's a whole process. Really, and the reason I said, I'd like to give them a floor plan is because it's sort of delegated design. Part of their process is designing it. But the more information you give them, the better, you're gonna get what you want as opposed to potentially guessing.
Okay.
So what sort of updates can we reasonably have for next meeting? Can we go over a floor plan? Could we go over? Well, it sounds like the location, we're just gonna push to put it where it is now, so maybe at least showing it on the site plan, so we know how it fits in.
Yeah, and if we can talk, I can get together with the chief more if he's satisfied with a layout that we've already sort of presented. It's really his house and the firefighters. So if they're happy with it, I don't really need to look at any of the other ones that have been presented. So we can lock that down too. And if this is the guide and we do a little modifications to it, then fine, we'll know that. Right?
Yeah,
Is
maybe
that
we
good, Chief?
can, yeah, maybe in one of the work group meetings, we can just, go over a couple of things and just, make sure, I don't have to live in it, like my personnel do. So I just want to make sure that, they put their eyes on it and whatever little tweaks there are, would work. I think, a couple of them have asked already about the old Boston temporary station and, could we use that or something like that? And I'm like, anything's on the table. So yeah, we maybe next week in the work room, just put an agenda item on there and go over it. And, I always have a couple of my seasoned veterans or shift commanders in the meeting, plus the shift that's on duty. So, we'll get the input we need and we can move forward, I think.
All right, I'll send you something before that with the suggestion I have about, making those rooms a little bit more private. And then you can look at it with
Yeah.
the guys.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so I would say maybe also for that next meeting, if we can just drop it on a site plan so we can see if it impacts anything.
Yep, I can do that.
And I guess is there also a step down where you need to get us a proposal for this? I know it was a TBD cost, so.
Yeah, yep. I just looked up, it is chapter 149, it's 44E.
Wow, I got that one right.
44E.
So I think we should probably just put this as a agenda item next meeting also. So
Yep.
we can discuss any progress with it. Okay, anything else anyone wants to add to the trailer discussion? All right. Please review the proposed overall project budget and expenditures to date. Clive, I think this was your.
Yep.
item.
So we haven't talked about dollars in a while, so I thought it'd be helpful just to bring that up. There's two items that were in the packet. The first one is a printout of the Excel spreadsheet that Ron sent us that shows all the costs of the $25.1 million overall budget, just so everybody had a copy of it as it stands today, and we'll update it as it changes in the future. The other is, so when we had a prior OPM, they had put together obviously a budget for the police station. And the finance department has simply been utilizing that layout to just keep track of payments so far. And so what is included in the back of your packet is exactly that. It shows through December 27th what we've spent. So you can see the payments to Vertex and Doran Whittier and legal costs, that sort of thing. It is a little bit confusing because it does have some previous payments for like the site work done to clear the ledge and put up some temporary fencing, shows up on that report. That's already been removed. When we get down to 3,345,000, which we all know is our starting point, that 157,000 you see in this report was prior to that. So it doesn't come out of what we have to spend now.
So it shouldn't be showing up in this chart, really?
It shouldn't, but like I said, this is the quickest thing I could get from them without asking them to start all over. So you see a line item for site work and you see a line item for previous design work in 2019 on the first page. Those don't come out of our bottom line. They were already accounted for. But it's just easier to just take it the way I got it. So, and this also doesn't reflect the payments since December 27th. So the final payments to Doran Whittier for feasibility and to Vertex aren't on here too. I wanted just you to see what we've actually spent since this group was formed. And then also wanted to just tell you that I think as we go forward, we're going to want to come up with a budget when we get to a final that we're actually going to work against, that is in a format everyone's comfortable with, so it can be reported to you on a regular basis. But at the 30,000 foot level, as I said in my background, if we started with 3,345,404, you count up what we have spent to date on here through Vertex, Doran Whittier, legal fees, bid project dog, some ads. It's just over almost 1,414,000, leaving us 1,931,580 towards trailer or future construction. So I just wanted to kind of bring it up since we hadn't talked about it.
Yeah, that 1,414,000 includes what we're going to pay Vertex and Doran Whittier.
Yes,
from here
so
to
through bidding, what we have committed to both firms, what it does not include is, since we don't know exactly which of the TBD additional services we were going to use,
Yeah.
it doesn't include those.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't know exactly what we were going to spend on those. So I only added up what's been paid already or committed.
Yep.
So we can work on a better layout for all of this. I just wanted to at least let you know, in case you were curious, what's gone out the door.
Yeah, I don't know, Steve, if you guys have any better format for it or something you've used on a past project, maybe to present those costs.
Yeah, we usually, we put something together that's sort of coincides with our budget line items. So we can show some examples if you want.
Sure.
Yep. So nothing to do about it, I just wanted to tell you.
Yep. Okay. Well, it seems like we have more than enough left over to do this trailer project at least. So,
And I thought everyone would like that confirmation.
yeah. So, okay. I think that was the last agenda because there's no minutes to approve, correct?
No, I gotta get those done. Sorry.
Okay. You're off the hook, Chris. Any other items that anyone wants to discuss then? All right. I'll ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting then.
So moved.
A
Second.
All right, we'll do a roll call vote. Justin Yanosik,
Aye, yes.
Kevin Champagne, aye. Sorry, I almost called on you, Steve. Bud Robinson,
Yes.
Aaron Hunt,
Aye.
John Kent,
Aye.
Chris Baker,
Yes.
Chief Kinney.
Yes.
All right. I think we're good then. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you, everyone.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thanks,
Good
everybody.
night.
You. Have a
Hey,
good
good night.
night.
Yep, bye.